Hey guys, Pieguyrulz here, and welcome to a Spongey Bits Rant. This time we're going to be talking about Who Bob What Pants, aka Whatever Happened to SpongeBob. Here's what I said in my initial review. Whatever happened to SpongeBob? After running away, SpongeBob loses his memory and tries to make it in New Kelp City. Much like in Pest of the West, this episode is really bland. It's actually kind of funny that SpongeBuck becomes a sheriff in that one, and SpongeBob, or Cheesehead, becomes a mayor in this one. If I had to pick between the two episodes, I'd probably pick this one. They're both really boring, but this one is less offensively so. Nothing in this episode is actually funny, although it's mildly amusing when they start calling him Cheese Boy. I also question the choice to make SpongeBob lose his memory. It's such a cliche, and it's kind of weird that they would do this, especially when SpongeBob's character is so flexible that they can pretty much do whatever they want with him anyway. I will say the climax in this is a lot better than Pest of the West, in that there's actually some interesting things going on with SpongeBob and his bubbles versus the gang and their slingshots and stuff. Also, and this is small, but why is the mayor of Bikini Bottom also the mayor of New Kelp City? Just make another character model, guys. This one's another scumbag, although like Pest of the West, it was relatively close to meh. I think what ultimately does is the fact that SpongeBob loses his memory, so we're really following a main character who isn't even our main character anymore, and is in an unfamiliar location. It almost feels like some sort of weird backdoor pilot to some spin-off show of SpongeBob's twin. The entire thing just really feels off. It's a shame too, because this one could have also been salvaged. If SpongeBob had actually wanted to set out for the big city on his own, I don't know, maybe to try to make it there, maybe to prove to everyone else that he could make something of himself in the big city and come back a winner, then yeah, this could have worked. Could have been cool to see SpongeBob journey to outside lands. Could be cool to see SpongeBob in a big city. But no, this entire thing is just really bland, and without any side characters for SpongeBob to bounce off of, he's also not very interesting on his own. Oh, and Gary looks horrifying without his shell. Also, man, is everyone just really mean-spirited towards SpongeBob in this episode? Like, seriously, it seems like everyone decided to call him Idiot Boy specifically to make him feel bad. What's also kind of weird about this episode is that SpongeBob is highly perceptive of what his friends think about him, when usually Squidward will openly insult him and he'll have no other expression but happiness on his face. I suppose I should say something about the face that SpongeBob makes in New Kelp City, and it's an interesting one. This is one of those strange episodes where I definitely didn't like it from the start, but I couldn't really pinpoint what the biggest problem was. Everything I say in the review, I stand by, but after a lot of pondering, I think the big problem with the episode is that, strangely enough, it tries to do too much. The episode has to set up SpongeBob leaving, establish that he loses his memory, establish that his friends miss him and are hunting for him, have him try out jobs, have him have his encounter with the Bubble Poppin' Boys, have him become the mayor, have him go back home. There's a lot that this is trying to do, and as such, it becomes cluttered. There's not any breathing room for jokes or elaborating on any of the sequences. All you get for SpongeBob trying on jobs is a quick montage. It could have actually been funny to see SpongeBob legitimately trying to do other jobs. It could have been legitimately epic and interesting to have SpongeBob's friends journey to find him, but they just didn't have time to make anything epic or big or funny. And there's two ways of fixing this. Either you cut out the stuff that isn't really needed, like the amnesia plot, SpongeBob becoming mayor, and you could have cut out Squidward entirely, and if anything, the plot would have been a lot better for it. It spends way too much time on Squidward and the Fabergé egg. The joke at the very end where Squidward takes his brain out of his head comes out of nowhere and doesn't have anything to do with anything and is not funny. And there's a scene where Squidward smashes the machine that would have helped them get back SpongeBob, which makes the minute they spent setting the thing up to have been pointless, and makes Squidward seem overly mean. It's not necessarily out of character for Squidward to have done this, but it comes across as a little bit brutal and just honestly not necessary to the episode. If it were about how Squidward misses SpongeBob and wants to get him back, then that's one thing, but this really shouldn't have involved him at all. It would have been perfectly fine if it was just Sandy and Patrick searching for SpongeBob. Heck, that's happened both in Nature Pants and I Had an Accident. So there definitely was elements that could have been canned early on. And the other thing they could have done is to have made this the TV movie of the season. Seriously, Atlantis SquarePantis did not have enough plot to fill the time, but this definitely does. You could dedicate the entire first act to having SpongeBob feel mistreated and unloved, and actually justify why SpongeBob wants to leave Bikini Bottom. You could make the Bubble Poppin' Boys climax be even bigger and more interesting. You can appropriately foreshadow the Bubble Poppin' Boys without it seeming incredibly weird as it does in the episode proper. You could have SpongeBob actually make a friend in the new city and have someone to bounce off of, which is something I felt was sorely needed in this episode. But they didn't. Nickelodeon wanted Atlantis to be the TV movie, so it was. And in fact, I'd even argue that maybe the whole amnesia subplot was put in because of Nickelodeon. If you think about it, they marketed this whole thing as Who Bob What Pants. They didn't really focus on any of the other parts of the episode other than the fact that SpongeBob loses his memory and doesn't know who he is in a strange new town. So maybe that's not the writer's fault either. Though whoever's fault it is, this thing is clearly a big mistake. And it really does just go to show that SpongeBob shouldn't do too many of these 22-minute episodes. The show's strong suit is doing very simple plots. There are definitely ways to have made this work, but it would take a lot of time and work to have sorted it all out and made it be a very epic and interesting story. And again, I hesitate to blame the writers because in all likelihood, it is probably the fault of how little time they have to work on each episode. But yeah. This episode is incredibly bloated, and instead of actually trying to go for comedy or any sort of emotional core behind it, they are only concerned with hitting the plot points. This video was sponsored by Patreon user Chris E. Thank you very much for suggesting this, and I apologize that this is coming out so late. Oh, and before I end things here, I should talk a little bit more about that one face that SpongeBob makes in the episode. I think people are overreacting. It's just a still image. Yes, it's ugly, yes, it could be jarring if you've never seen the episode before, but it's just a picture. It's not like Squidward getting his toenail ripped out, which is in motion. It's not like SpongeBob trying to rip out his splinter, which is in motion. It's just a picture. In fact, it's called a gross-up close-up. SpongeBob's been doing this ever since the first season. And maybe if this had been in an episode that was really funny and just had joke after joke coming, and then this thing pops up, it could have been actually funny. Or if the story was written a lot better, this still could have been seen as a physical representation of how far SpongeBob has fallen without his friends to support him. But as it is in the context of the episode right now, it's just an ugly face on top of an already boring, stupid, not funny, and just convoluted plot. So I can see why people hate this, but for me, it's just another attempt at a joke that just completely fell flat. Pieguyrulz, out.